Today we'll be talking about colonial administration in Nigeria. Colonial administration in Nigeria. If you're talking about colonial administration in Nigeria, well, we talked about the reason why the colonial masters came to Nigeria. You know, in 1885, 1886, when Africa was about to be partitioned by the Europeans, Africa was partitioned. There's a meeting that was headed in Berlin, which is referred to as the Berlin Conference in the year 1885, 1886. That was where Africa was partitioned among the Europeans, and Nigeria was given to Britain. So Britain colonized Nigeria. When the colonial masters came to Nigeria, in fact, let's even talk about the reason why the colonial masters actually came to Nigeria. One of the reasons the colonial masters came to Nigeria is, number one, they were in search of markets for their products. Number two, they were looking for an opportunity where they will actually have people who can actually work with them in their place or in their places. Because not only Britain came to Nigeria, not only Britain actually came to Africa, we have other colonial masters that actually came to African country. Some German, some French. The French one is the one we call they use French policy, but for the Britain that came to Africa, that came to Nigeria, they use a particular policy to colonize Nigeria. That particular policy is called an indirect rule policy, indirect rule system. Why do they actually make use of that indirect rule system? Indirect rule system, they make use of indirect rule system because there was already a well-established socio-political system in Nigeria before the coming of the colonial masters, whereby we have, for instance, under the Oyo Empire, we have the Oba, we have the Oyo Messi, and we have the Ogboni. The Oba serve as the executive arm. The Ogboni serve as the kingmaker, which is the legislative arm, and the judiciary, which is the Ogbonis. So there is already a well-established system of government in Nigeria before the coming of the colonial masters. And if you go to the northern part of the country, you see they also have what we call an emirate system. The emirate system, where we have the emir as a leader, we have under the emirate system, we have the Sakin Ruwa, Sakin Power, we have the Dogara, we have different persons, different positions of authority under this emirate system. That means the functions of government are being divided among this particular set of persons. It is departmental. Every persons have their own functions they actually carried out. The only place we can actually say there is no a well-structured political system is the eastern part, which they practice what they call a cephalous system of government. You know, the Igbos does not believe in a centralized system of government. They only have what we call they have a system called a cephalous system. Well, we only have what we call the Okpara, the Ofus, the Ozus, and the age grade. But in other regions, like the Yorubas, like the southwestern region, like the northern region, I've made mention of that. So when the colonial masters came, they discovered that it would be very difficult for them to actually penetrate or rule Nigeria as a country. So what they did was that they actually used the existing structure to rule the people. What do I mean by existing structure? They actually use the traditional system that was already established. So they make use of the traditional leaders to actually control the people, don't let me use the word enslave the people. They also use that particular system to control the people. So how do they control the people through this particular system? Like in the western part of the country, they use the Obas, they use the traditional rulers, and the traditional rulers, they also have a particular functions they carried out. Like in some areas, there's what we call privy council. In that particular privy council, if there's anything happening in that particular society, instead of the colonial masters actually judging that particular case by themselves, they assign traditional rulers to actually be in charge of those things, settlement of dispute and all of that. So this particular indirect rule system goes along with the traditional rulers being used by the colonial masters to govern the people. So, like, for instance, now I don't understand your language, which is part of the reason they make use of indirect rule system. They don't understand our culture. They don't understand the topographical system of this particular place. So using our traditional rulers, it will help them. It actually helped them a lot. If there's anything they actually needed in this particular system, they normally use the traditional rulers to actually get this particular system. The only thing that served as a barricade was some of these traditional rulers, like Jaja of Okuba, at a particular time, he actually resisted them. And you discover that some of these traditional rulers who actually resisted them were actually sent on an exile, like the Kosoko of Lagos, like the Oba of Benin, Benin. Some of these particular Obas were actually sent on an exile because at a particular time they resisted this particular practice. And part of the reason they actually use this particular indirect rule system is because this particular indirect rule system has a lot of benefits to them. It helps them to actually exploit, which is one of the main reasons they actually came to Africa, or to Nigeria in particular. They were in search of markets, in search of new market, and they also came here to exploit. They came here to exploit things from here in order to build their places. So when they came here, we have a governor general. The leadership in Britain, the government of Britain, sent a representative to Nigeria who served as a governor general. And the first governor general that was sent was Lord Lugard. And seeing a particular country like this, which is very vast, with different culture and different ethnic group, which is very, very difficult to actually understand. So what Lord Lugard did was, there's what we call amalgamation. He actually did what we call amalgamation in 1914. After that particular amalgamation, he actually ruled Nigeria, and to some extent there were benefits for ruling Nigeria at that particular period to Britain, to the British system. So after that particular period, we also have another representative from Britain. We have and they also have achievement, although successive colonial administration has what they call achievements. Like in 1922 under Clifford Constitution, Clifford introduced the first constitutional system in Nigeria. I guess that should be the first constitutional system in West Africa, which is Clifford Constitution of 1922. For the first time in Africa, Clifford Constitution introduced us to what we call elective principle. That was Nigeria is the first country in Africa, in West Africa, that practices the elective principle. That means people were given the opportunity to actually vote during election. Just that there are criteria before you can actually vote or contest in an election. So, as at that particular period, when that particular system was introduced, that particular constitution was introduced. That particular constitution, for the first time, introduced what's called mass media. So, for the first time, Daily Times was introduced. So it gives the people opportunity to actually know what is happening in their society. So it gives the people opportunity to know what the colonial masters want them to do and what is actually happening in their environment. And for the first time, that particular constitution also introduced us to what we call political party, because before that particular time, there was nothing like political party. So in 1923, for the first time, we had what we call political party, and that was NNDP, Nigerian National Democratic Party, formed by Abat Macaulay. That particular political party served as a template for people to actually practice the political system. It actually served as a template or a platform for people to also contest and showcase their leadership skill within the system. Apart from NNDP, other political party was also formed, like NCNC, like NYM, Northern Youth Movement, NCNC, and also other political party was also formed as well. Some formed in 1935, some formed in 1945, some formed in 1944, on and on like that. After Clifford Constitution of 1922, another colonial masters was also sent, which was referred to as Richard. Richard also introduced us to another constitutional system. For the first time, Richard introduced us to what we call regional system. Regional system is a system of government in which people can actually use their resources to better the lives of the people within that particular system alone. Using the resources of that particular geographical entity to develop that particular geographical entity, and it actually helped the people, the governments to actually move closer to the people, to know the people, and for the government and for the people to move closer to the government as well. That is Richard Constitution. Apart from Richard Constitution, don't forget the fact that I said there was a particular union that was actually formed in London, because under that colonial administration, there are some the colonial administration does not incorporate the elite. The elite were actually against that particular system, because they actually know the purpose of colonial system. They know that this is an indirect rule of slavery. They know that this particular system of government is just like is a system of government that actually came to exploit them mentally, exploit them materially. So many of them were actually against it. So the whites actually understand this part, that this particular set of persons were actually against this particular thing. And no, this reminds me that in 1925 there's a particular union that was formed in London, which is student union, which was formed in London. It was formed in London in 1925. One of the reasons why this particular union was formed in London is to fight against colonialism, neocolonialism, and imperialism in Africa. Don't forget. And from this particular organization, nationalists begin to spring up, because this particular organization gives the nationalists opportunity to hear their opinion, opportunity to fight for the people, because these are called elites. These are people who actually went to school at that particular period. They were educated, so they understand the difference between right and wrong. They understand the opinion, and they understand the mindset, and they understand the purpose for which this colonial masters came to Africa, and particularly Nigeria. So many of them were actually against it. So this particular elite were constantly fighting against this particular system for a long period of time, although they were able to conquer this particular system in 1960. So after Richard Constitution, we also have what we call Mafasin Constitution. Mafasin Constitution came in 1951. Mafasin Constitution, for the first time, introduced what they call House of Representatives, because for the first time we had what they call central legislative system. Before then, we don't have central legislative system. We only have a regional system, legislative system, which is like the Western legislative system, the Northern legislative system. So, and we also have House of Chiefs in the northern part of the country. But for the first time, we have what we call a central legislative system that was introduced under Mapasi constitutional system. And when that particular system was introduced, let me even say this particular system, this particular central legislative system was part of what actually gave birth to 1960 independence. Because when this particular central legislative system was formed, some persons were actually elected, the legislature. And one of those legislators, a particular man called Anthony Enaro from Edo State, was the first person that moved the motion for self-government. He said Nigeria should be made independent, although some northerners were not happy about it. In fact, when he actually made this particular move that Nigeria should be made independent, many of those northerners actually walked out of the legislative walked out of that particular sitting. So, and from that particular period, there was this kind of consciousness that actually rose in the mindset of Nigerians, especially the elite, and they started agitating for self-government seriously. After this particular constitution too, another one came on board, which was called Lincoln Constitution of 1954. Lincoln Constitution of 1954 also has its own achievement. It introduced what they call a federal system. For the first time, federalism. For the first time in Nigeria. So all these particular colonial masters, they introduced different systems which actually help them, and to some extent also help our system, which actually gave birth to the constitution which we actually enjoy today, which is the independent constitution, which other constitution was actually built on. And at this juncture, we can actually say that the colonial administration has its own positive effects and also negative effects. One of the negative effects was the indirect slavery, because I could remember, if you read some of these things that they actually did for the first time too, during they were actually taxing the people excessively too during that particular system, using the traditional ruler, which led to the Aba Women Riot of 1929. Because of the tax was excessive. But this tax was done through the traditional rulers. Don't forget the fact that I made mention of indirect rule system. They were actually using the traditional rulers to tax the people excessively, to exploit the people excessively. But at the end of the day, we can actually say that we actually have the positive side of the of the colonial administration. Because if not for the colonial administration, too many of us might not have been educated today, because the colonial administration, when they came, they also established schools. Don't forget, they established schools. Some of in the religious aspect, we can also say when some of these foreigners also came from Europe. Don't forget the fact that they also established, they built churches, and in these churches too, some of these churches as schools were also built within the vicinity of these churches, which actually gave the people opportunity to go to school to read and write. And today we can actually say we actually benefited from that particular system in a particular way, at least in educational aspect. But in other aspects, we can actually say it actually affected Nigeria and Africa negatively. In conclusion, it has a side effect, both positive and negative. So in our next class, we'll talk further on that particular aspect. But I want us to do a short aside to write to give an answer to some assignments which I will actually mention here. You should write a short note on colonial administration in Nigeria. Number two, right? What are the 5 reasons for the coming of the colonial of the colonials, masters in Africa? Number 3, what are the rules? What is the system of government being used by the colonial masters in Nigeria? And what is the system of government being used because by the French colonial masters in other countries, referred to as a francophone speaking country? Countries that have been colonized by the Britain can actually be referred to as an Anglophone speaking countries. But what about the francophone speaking countries that have been colonized by the Britain? What are the colonial system of government that was being used? Tell us. So in our next class, we'll talk more on that and I will explain more on that. Thank you and God bless you.
Quiz.